Hey, Marcus House with you here, and welcome to episode 16 in our quick progression series. Today we're going to do something we haven't done before. We're going to first upgrade our runway. We're going to create our first SSTO and our first aircraft as it happens. Because we've got quite a lot of cash on hand, we're upgrading both our runway and our spaceplane hangar. Just unlocking the first tier on these two buildings is going to allow us to create a reasonably large vessel that is going to do everything we want it to do in our first SSTO mission, which of course stands for Single Stage to Orbit. We're just going to head into our research and development facility here, and we've got a lot of things to unlock here. Essentially what we want to do is unlock our entire aerodynamics tree here to get right up to the aerospace tech. What we want is this Rapier engine. So first of all, we need to unlock all of the tiers leading up to this particular engine, and we are going to be using a lot of these parts anyway. So we want to unlock high altitude, of course we want to unlock hypersonic flight, and of course we're going to unlock that aerospace tech there to unlock that Rapier engine. We're also going to grab that advanced aerodynamics branch, which is going to let us unlock a lot of those control surfaces, those elevon parts and whatnot. And we'll just have a little more of an explore around. I think this is probably about all we need to build our first single stage to orbit craft here. Just having a bit of a look. I don't think we need any of these other parts, that's cool. Actually, we are going to need this advanced landing tier because it's got the medium landing gear. We do need that. And also, again, just having a little bit more of a look around to see if there's anything else we need. We've got some more science points left to use. We'll also unlock this specialised control tier here. This is going to give us the Werner engines, which are really powerful RCS engines. We're just going to unlock that miniaturisation branch too. It's just going to give us a few small parts. I don't know if we need them, but we're going to need these docking ports soon. I'll just grab the high power electrics tier as well. That's going to give us some really big batteries, and these batteries are really handy actually for placing on fuel tanks. Still got over 1,000 science left after unlocking all that too, so that's great. Lots more tiers to unlock, but at the moment we don't need any of these other tiers, I don't think. So we'll leave the facility there, jump back into our spaceplane hangar, and we'll start by dropping on our Mk2 cockpit, which will be the start of our new SSTO vessel. Directly behind that we're going to add an Mk2 Clampertron docking port there. And directly behind that we're going to grab an Mk2 cargo bay and drop that on as well. Now you might ask why we're using Mk2 parts, not Mk1 parts for our first SSTO, and that's because the heat tolerance on the Mk2 parts are much higher. We of course need to fuel this thing, so we're going to grab Mk2 liquid fuel fuselages. We'll grab 3 short ones and just stack in place. So you'll see there that the max temp for the skin of the Mk2 parts are 2,500K, which is quite a lot higher than the Mk1 parts. Just dropping on that Mk2 bicoupler part at the end, and of course on the end of that is our 2 new Rapier engines. Now we're going to grab the FLT800 fuel tanks, and we're going to stack 2 along each side of our vessel here, and going to then plonk on 2 more Rapier engines on the end of that. On the outside of this now we want to add our atomic rocket motor stage, so we're going to line up Mk1 liquid fuel fuselages right along the outside, 4 of them in fact. And we're going to grab 2 of those much larger batteries that we've just unlocked and plonk those in on the inner liquid fuel tanks. Now for the Rapier engines to run efficiently they need a lot of air intakes to actually work inside the atmosphere, so we need to add 4 of these shot cone intakes on the end of each of our segments. Now we want all the liquid fuel that can be transferred to the outside atomic engine, so we're just adding these external fuel ducts there. So we now need to look at our aerodynamic surfaces. First of all we're going to grab some tail fins and place on the inside there like this. This is just going to give us a lot more ability to use our yaw axis on our craft as we're doing small corrections. And of course we want to add our 2 atomic rocket motors on the end of this outside stage here. So just picking up our main wing surface, the delta wing, which we'll place on the outside. Just trying to get that lined up perfectly horizontally, and we'll place that there. And we're just going to place an elevon 3 control surface on both sides of that. These are a little fiddly, you just want to hover around slowly until they snap to that horizontal axis like that. That's not going to be enough lift for this vessel though, so we need to grab another small delta wing, which we're going to place further up against those liquid fuel tanks there. Now, the amount of control surfaces and wing area you need depends largely on the weight of your craft, so you just need to play around till you get that right. So we're just adding a Elevon 3 to this front small delta wing as well, of course. As we get higher up into the atmosphere, we need a lot more air intake space to actually fuel our Rapier engine, so we're going to grab a few of these radial air intakes and place them on top of our vessel. Again, you need to play around a little with how much air intake area you need to fuel your engines in the higher atmosphere. These intakes are only 0.03 of a tonne, so we can add a number of these. I find it's better to be safe than sorry with the air intakes. So I've dropped a few more of those on the bottom of the vessel as well. Just tweaking the position of all the tanks just with the move tool there, just so they're sitting a little closer together. They look a little spaced out for my liking. We don't want our vessel just falling apart in midair. Regardless, I always find it good to just secure everything just with a few struts through the major parts of the body anyway. Just placing these in mirror mode here, just at the front and the end of our fuel tanks. This may not always be necessary, but I find it's, again, better to be safe than sorry when it comes to the stability of the vessel. So of course we need power for our SSTO craft, so we're going to grab some solar panels and place some at the back there. And as well two at the front, and we're just going to angle those differently just so they don't shadow each other. Of course, we're not going to get off the ground without some wheels and some landing gear, so we're going to grab our new medium landing gear. We'll place that one on the front, and we'll place two, of course, on the back. As far to the outside of the craft as you can get them, really, is the best place to put them, I find. Now, in this mission, we're going to load up 2 scientists. And because they're going to be 2 scientists, we're not going to have a pilot on board, so we're going to add a Probidobodyne OKTO2 core unit into the cargo bay. And also in the cargo bay, we're just going to drop 2 small monopropellant tanks for our RCS. This, of course, leaves plenty of room for other cargo. So we need some RCS control. We're going to grab the RCS thruster block, the RV105s, and we're going to place one at the top and one at the bottom near that centre of mass. We're also going to grab 2 more of those and place them on the side of our vessel. That's going to give us good up, down, left, right movement. We're also going to grab 2 Verna engines for the top and the bottom, and we're going to place those towards the front of the vessel. This is going to give us good movement when we come into land, because we're going to come into land in a retrograde manner vertically. We're actually going to be landing on Minmus in this mission, as we said. So you can see we've got our centre of mass and our centre of lift just a little bit off, so we need to move our wings back. We want our centre of lift to actually be behind, just slightly behind our centre of mass. We also want to give ourselves some extra control and extra lift at the front of our craft, so we're going to add the standard canard onto both sides. So just up here, up the front, that's about right there. Now this obviously modifies our centre of lift again, so we're going to push this back even further still here now. That's about as far back as we're going to get that. We'll move everything forward just a little, just to balance this out a little better. This will just pull the centre of mass forward, and then we can then move this centre of lift backwards to fall again back behind the centre of mass. It's really important that you get your centre of mass and your centre of lift correct, because if you don't, you'll find that your vessel flips either up or down. Now, looking at the bottom of the craft there, we've got space on the outside to add a few more of those radial air intakes again, just to be safe, so we'll just place a few on the liquid fuel tanks there. Give that a name, large SSTO, we'll save that. And what we also need to do is actually take out a lot of the oxidizer. We don't need a lot of the oxidizer, so you'll see here I've taken half of the oxidizer out of all the fuel tanks. And this is essentially because the atomic rocket motors don't need any oxidizer at all. They use only liquid fuel, and we can therefore kill a lot of that dead weight. We only need enough oxidizer to get out of the atmosphere. So that kills off a lot of our dead weight, and you can see there all of our liquid fuel components are still full. We also want our atomic engines to be on a different stage so that we can fire them separately. Now, the Rapier engine has got a very, very cool feature. It can actually switch modes from air-breathing mode into closed cycle mode that actually uses internal oxidizer. So I've set up the action group so that the abort button will actually switch the mode of the Rapier engines. So we're launching here, and you'll see we've got loaded up our 2 scientists. And we're actually going to be performing a fictitious mission today. We're taking our 2 scientists, and we're going to bring the 2 scientists that have been processing science like mad on Minmus home. After their very long stay, they've been working extremely hard for the last few years. Now you'll notice that Rapier engines are actually quite low on power in the lower atmosphere at lower speeds. It's not until you reach higher speeds at higher atmospheres that they become really great. Of course, we need to first get in the air, so we're just running down the runway here. Just having a few slight steering problems as we run down the runway. And we're just waiting until we can get as much speed on the ground as we can before we take off here. And lift off, and our landing gear needs to come up now, of course. Now what we want to do is just head towards that 90-degree mark like we always would be for a normal rocket launch, and we want to just slowly climb and climb and climb and climb until we get to around 5,000 to 6,000 meters. Getting up to that altitude initially takes quite a while because at the moment this vessel is quite heavy. This particular vessel can't pick up a lot more speed at this altitude simply because there's so much drag, and because the Rapier engines at this speed and at this altitude don't produce a lot of thrust. Now, single stage to orbit vessels are actually extremely difficult. In real life, one of the main promising craft in development is Skylon, which is now set to have some more engine tests done in 2019. So we're at that 6,000 meter mark, so we're going to level out, and we're going to maybe drop in altitude just a little bit, but you'll see that our surface speed is now ticking up. We want this to get well above 400, 500, 600 meters per second before we start climbing again. So you can see there we're almost up to 400, and we're time accelerating again just to watch this climb. So you'll see we've already dropped down around 4,000 meters in altitude again, but our speed has climbed dramatically, 700 meters per second now. So now we can start to climb, head just towards that 20-degree marker on your nav ball, and up we go. So we're at 11,000, 12,000, 13,000 meters. Basically, we want to try now to level ourselves back out just as we hit around that 21,000 meter mark. Of course, as we're climbing to that altitude, you'll notice that our speed is quite high now, but our Rapier engines are starting to fail out due to the low air pressure. As we hit this speed, our cockpit's really dramatically overheating now, so we need to pull our nose up, and we're going to fire our atomic engine stage. Essentially, this is just going to give us just a little more thrust at this altitude. The atomic engines aren't overly efficient anyway, but it just gives us a little more thrust to keep our acceleration going. And we'll hit that abort button now and switch from air breathing mode to closed cycle mode on our Rapier engines, and that's going to give us loads more thrust to get out of the atmosphere. Now this is always the tricky part, of course, because right now we are burning absolutely loads of fuel and we're not gaining a great deal of speed because we're really trying to get some altitude to get out of the atmosphere, obviously. We want to stay in this mode for as short a time as possible, so we're going to try to get ourselves just to around 55,000 meters. 2, 3, 4, 5, there we go. We're just going to kill all engines there, and we're going to wait as long as we can to re-fire up our atomic engines. I've just hit that abort button to switch our Rapier engines back to air breathing mode so that they can't fire back up again. And firing those atomic engines again. We need these babies to take us all the way to orbit now. As we're getting ourselves out of the atmosphere, of course, our atomic engines still aren't running 100% as efficiently as they could be because we're not in a complete vacuum yet. The thing is, of course, though, we need to fire our atomic engines well before we hit our apoapsis, otherwise we are going to fall back to Kerbal without being able to get into orbit, so it's really all down to timing. So again, this is the big problem with single-stage to orbit craft, because essentially you need either one engine that can perform in both a vacuum and in the atmosphere, which is almost impossible, or you need to have two different types of engine, which again increases your weight. You need to carry fuel types for both engine types, and the vessel is just much bigger and clunkier than it really could be if you didn't have to worry about atmospheric issues. The engine being developed for Skylon, as an example, is called Sabre, and that uses a very similar sort of air-breathing rocket engine that can switch modes, kind of like these Rapier engines. So just getting up to orbital speed here now, and there we go there. So we'll just pop our apoapsis there up to around 90,000 meters on the other side of our orbit. And we're actually still not quite at that 70,000 meter mark, so we're still technically in the atmosphere, although the atmospheric drag at this point isn't really causing us much grief. So just quickly doing a bit of a tally on fuel to make sure we've got enough for our mission, and we do. So we'll just pop out all of our solar panels so that we're generating electricity for our quite large batteries. So you'll see there we've got quite a lot of fuel left, quite a lot of liquid fuel left for our atomic engine, so we're going to head to Minmus. We're going to set that as the target. What we've done here is we've actually timed our launch to coincide with Minmus's orbit, and that's so that Minmus is going to actually encounter our vessel just as it hits our descending node for Minmus. So the idea is we're going to plan our manoeuvre so that we encounter Minmus right on that descending node, meaning we don't need to do that inclination change. And of course we've got plenty of fuel with our atomic engines to get to Minmus. It's going to be a little tight getting back from Minmus, so we do have to be efficient. So we'll turn our vessel around to our manoeuvre node marker and we'll warp around to begin our quite long burn, which is going to take us to Minmus. We have 900 meters per second that we need to add here, so we're going to start our burn quite early, 2.5 minutes early actually. This burn's going to take us almost 5 minutes, so we'll speed up the video through this. The amount of fuel we actually have in our tanks is a little deceiving. It looks like it's almost empty, but because we're running only on atomic engines now, it's actually going to give us quite a long burn time. Over halfway there now. And as we're coming up to the burn complete here, we're going to back our thrust off just so that we can just more accurately, slowly burn the rest of the way. And once we've got that encounter, we can then zoom into Minmus to plot our encounter even more accurately. You can see there our orange orbit lines there with the periapsis marker. So I've just turned on RCS mode and I can just do some very fine adjustments to this now with our H and N keys just to push our orbit marker there back and forwards a little. Now we're also going to do a slight inclination change as well to get us more in line with the equatorial plane of Minmus. So we're going to warp in here obviously to the apoapsis marker, which is the slowest point in our orbit, only 44 meters per second we're doing here, so this is a great place to do our inclination change. So just facing the normal marker here, and this is going to allow us just to do slight adjustments so that we're going to come into Minmus on that more equatorial plane. So again, just focusing back in on Minmus, this lets us just see much more accurately what our corrections are doing. What we want to do here, of course, is actually land very, very close to that Minmus base that we've had set up for quite some time now. And come to think of it, I think this is the first time in this series that we've actually needed to land at a specific location. And in fact, we're going to have to do it a second time because we want to ideally land this single stage to orbit vessel back at our Kerbal Space Center. So we're just going to time warp in now to our periapsis marker there. And essentially we're going to start plotting our orbit. We'll just keep it at quite a distant orbit for the moment. All we really want to do here at the moment is just circularize and wipe off a lot of our current velocity. This is just going to mean that we can make several orbits if we need to, just to plan our landing correctly. So you can see there our Minmus base is actually out on the opposite side of the planet in the dark there. We actually want to bring that over into the light, so we're going to time accelerate and we're going to do a couple of orbits until our Minmus base is in the correct placement. Now what we need to do to ensure that we fly right over the Minmus base is actually change our inclination, and we do that 90 degrees from the Minmus base itself. Setting up a manoeuvre node, of course, is the easiest way to estimate this, and you just want to try to focus in firstly on Minmus, so double click the Minmus moon, and what you want to do is keep your camera pointed directly above the Minmus base so that you can guess quite accurately where your trajectory lines need to cross to land perfectly near Minmus. Now, of course, Minmus is also rotating at the same time, so you have to also take into account that our Minmus base is going to slightly move forwards to the right of the screen there as you're coming in to land. Now, of course, there's a lot of great mods that let you do this much more easily. MechJeb, of course, is the one that comes to mind, but there's nothing better than to actually try to do this yourself. Now what we're going to do here as a safety measure is actually transfer all of the fuel that we can into our atomic rocket motor stages, just so that we don't run out. We do have only a small amount left in there, but we've still got plenty in all of our other tanks. Time accelerating into our landing here, and just about to start our burn here now. Just need to turn retrograde there first. And starting our burn now, only 9 kilometers away from our Minmus base, and doing just over 130 meters per second currently. So we're just going to reduce a lot of our velocity there just until the Minmus base starts passing underneath us. And what we basically want to do now is just remove all of that remaining horizontal velocity, and we do that just by pointing our nav ball just at the horizon marker, and we just burn until we see our retrograde marker go up towards the center of the nav ball. Just coming in here now to a very close approach, and we're just going to reduce our speed down to around 25 meters per second. And as we get closer to the ground, of course, we just wipe off a little more speed. We don't want to wipe it all off, otherwise we're just dropping too slowly, so we want to just keep the speed manageable. What you don't want to do, of course, is just come in too fast and hit the ground. So just coming in here, only 100 meters here left to go in our altitude, and we'll just touch down very gently. In fact, we actually don't want to touch the ground itself. As we get to the ground, we just want to thrust upwards a little and then turn ourselves over. We're just going to switch on our RCS here in a moment, and we're going to use these new Werner engines, which are going to point our nose down towards the ground. So you can see there that these Werner engines have got more than enough power to lift the nose of our vessel right off the ground very easily on Minmus. So we've touched down, we turn our RCS off, and away we go. So we're a little ways off from the Minmus base, only 1 kilometer away though, so that was actually a pretty good way to eyeball our landing. I'm pretty happy with that. So we'll turn around now and do a slight thrust towards our Minmus base, and we'll actually just roll over there. Just turning around, of course, to face our target marker so that we know which way to go. And we'll just give ourselves a little burst from our atomic engines there to get ourselves moving. There we go. Around 8 meters per second there is plenty, and of course we can time warp until we get much closer to our Minmus Science Lab vessel over there. Of course, we're really hoping that the ground is solid, not filled with dust, otherwise this would not work very well at all, but luckily for us on Minmus, it seems to be flat. It's almost like running along a pavement, it's so smooth. This particular biome as well is completely flat, so that's also a bonus. Just a few hundred meters left to go here, and we'll just hit the brakes now to slowly slow us down, and we're going to do a little side skid to actually come in and wipe off a lot of our speed here. It's very slow to brake on Minmus, there's just no traction. So as we turn our craft towards the 90-degree marker on our nav ball, we can reflect back on this mission and ask the question, will we have enough fuel to get all the way back to Kerbal? Will our 2 new scientists enjoy some time on Minmus with their newly found scientist friends? Well, we'll conclude this mission next week. So I hope you enjoyed that video. If you have any questions for me, please do whack them down in the comments below. Thank you very much to all of you that have subscribed. And for those that haven't, please do subscribe to see more. Follow me on Twitter at MarcusHouseGame, and we'll see you in the next video. And then, of course, quickly we'll turn around so that we can land. Oh dear, let's see. Let's see if this works. Come on, come on, come on. Come on. And touchdown, I think. We're just kind of hovering around here on the surface. I don't know if we're actually touching it, are we?